Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup. And so, if you're on the around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Live video if you do indeed live video, and let's get straight into it. So, of course, starting off with the boxing news, and so Davis will fight Roach December 14th. There has been a bit of a build-up. I've kind of spoken about this fight already and my opinions on it, but obviously people don't seem too happy about, of course, Davis picking Roach as an opponent. There were other talks about him fighting Valenzuela, and of course, there's always talks about him fighting the likes of Stevenson and fellow fighters like that. But Roach is an interesting one. It did come as a bit of a surprise when I first heard it was announced, but Roach has got a lot of skills. Obviously, he's a world champion, so he definitely could cause problems for Davis. But he got hit quite a bit versus in his last fight, and then also he's not really seen as much of a big puncher in general in the division that he's in. Perhaps moving up in weight, it might increase some power a little bit, and he also may be more defensively sound. I think he is quite a defensively sound fighter, so perhaps the counters of Davis might be harder for him to land, but I just feel like it is going to be perhaps another level of class for Davis where he can show that because the styles will gel more for him to be able to find success. Like I say, if he can hurt or even just land consistent punches on roaches, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, no, it's an interesting fight. But I suppose at the end of the day, it is Davis fighting a fellow world champion, but just like I say, from the weight division below. And it's also going to be interesting to see if his belt gets vacated. That could be one of the most interesting things, in my opinion, if the belt gets vacated, because that could open up some big options for big fights in the super featherweight division. Moving on, Schofield will fight at Giron on November 2nd. The EBU have ordered Butler versus Edwards. I know Edwards was very keen calling out Butler after his win versus Asomba, so now the EBU's ordered it, it probably will end up happening. I think that is a great fight. Suleiman has joined the matchroom. Ruiz will fight Barnes October 11th. Valenzuela is rumoured to be fighting Kirioka December 24th, so it seems as though if Pitbull Cruz doesn't activate the rematch versus Valenzuela or push for a rematch versus Valenzuela, um, he's going to fight Hirioka, and obviously Hirioka just beat Barroso. I don't believe he is actually classed as the interim champion currently because I don't think Japanese boxing class interim champions as champions, so they don't fight for that type of titles. But nonetheless, I think it would be a very good contest, and I feel like fans that perhaps don't know Hirioka might think it's a poor fighter and things like that when it's not one of the big names. But in my opinion, like I say, is I think a really good contest, and it would make for a great fight. Ramirez versus Barboza Jr., Collazo versus Neomtrong, Zepeda versus Farmer, and Sims Jr. versus Duarte will fight November 16th. That is the undercard of Billum Smith versus Gilberto Ramirez. And so, yeah, like I say, it's a great card. I've spoke about a lot of these fights already. I mean, Ramirez versus Barboza Jr. is a fight that's been talked about for a little while now. Two guys realistically coming off quite poor performances and are some of the biggest names realistically for Golden Boy. So put them against each other. Hopefully, it makes for a good fight, but we'll have to wait and see because, like I say, they weren't coming off the best of performances. But Collazo versus Neomtrong, I think, is a fight that's not been talked about enough at all. I think it is an amazing fight. Probably the one that I'm actually most excited for on the card in general. Neomtrong obviously hasn't been that active as of recent, but then he's coming off a really good performance versus Winwood last time out, and that showed that he still's got it, and he's had the belts for a long time now. He's one of the most kind of he's been reigning for the longest of times, and Collazo has been coming up, has been really making statement wins. I mean, he's gotten a win versus fellow world champion Jerusalem, which is a great performance realistically, and is arguably number one in the minimum weight division at the moment. So I think this is the two best fighters in the minimum weight division going up against each other. And whenever you see two of the best fighters in their division going up against each other, I think it's always going to make for a great fight. And this is kind of the youth versus the old school, the experience, and I think it is an excellent fight. Zepeda versus Farmer, I think, will be a relatively convincing performance, probably favouring Zepeda, and Sims Jr. versus Duarte. It could be a firefight, it could be a great fight, to be honest. Moving on, Cameron versus Burgold, Esserman versus Vaughan, Taylor versus Isnaj, James versus Osborne Edwards, Lavin, Thompson, Limond, and Akbar will fight on November 2nd. Some good fights on that card, some good names, some people who I've had the pleasure of interviewing. Great to see Osborne Edwards getting a shot. And yeah, hopefully, maybe I'll be at that card. Hopefully, we'll have to wait and see. But it is a good card. Moving on, Norman Jr. vs. Cuevas is off, and so they seem to be wanting to remake that for 2025. I don't really think it's a fight in which people are that excited to see or really that wanting to see for 2025 or even in general, because Norman Jr. probably should be fighting Boots, but nonetheless it's off because Norman Jr. is injured. McCarthy, Dowling, Allen, O'Neill, and Murphy will fight November 1st. Char will fight Pulev December 7th, see if that fight actually goes ahead this time. I've already done a prediction for that, so feel free to scroll back on my channel and find that if you're interested in prediction for it. Yoshida will fight Metcalf October 23rd, so that kind of means that Ebony Bridges is not getting the rematch versus Yoshida, so I don't really know what's happening with her. She's just not fought since the loss and not really been talked about having an announcement since the loss. And that was a little while ago now. Fundora versus Alanis will fight November 2nd. I think that is a great contest with two very good Golden Boy fighters. There is some good names in the Golden Boy women's stable. There is, like I say, a few floating around, and I think Fundora and Alanis is a great matchup. The EBU have ordered Shiraz versus Bentley. No surprise there, really. It seems like they've been setting up that fight to happen for a long time. Obviously, Shiraz probably does want much higher level opposition, but Bentley has fought for a world title that not that long ago, and he put up a really valiant effort. And obviously, he did lose to Heaney, but he's been on a good course as of recent, knocking out pretty much everybody. So, it's one of them things. Crawford is tempted to fight McGregor for 200 million. It seems like perhaps that probably isn't going to happen because McGregor's also talked about, doing like a 2-fight deal with Crawford, but then obviously Crawford doesn't want to fight in MMA, so I don't really know, but he seemed like he was tempted if it was 200 million, and I suppose for 200 million, why not? Why not? And there is very limited options realistically available currently at this very moment in time for Crawford. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Paro versus Hitchens, Rivera, Diaz, Roman, Nieves, Conlon, Castro, and Pinero will fight December 7th. That is a nice card. Paro fighting one of the mandatories in Hitchens, who is coming off a bit of a performance, so it'll be a real interesting to see if he can rise to the level needed. Conlon has joined Pro Box. Yard and Courtney will fight October 19th. The return of Anthony Yard, just having a bit of a get back type fight. Conlon Fury still wants to fight Joshua. He still believes that fight has to happen, no matter when, no matter how old, and no matter what happens with his rematch versus Usyk. He still believes that fight should happen, which I suppose is a good thing. But why didn't he have this mentality a couple of years ago? I'm not sure. Tucker Feliz Nyber will fight November 2nd. Moten will fight Moreno October 12th. Hearn has said if Joshua vs Dubois 2 happens, it will likely be in Saudi. Ori has been offered to join WWE. Inoue is set to fight Goodman December 24th. I think that probably is the toughest test, in my opinion, in the Super Bantamweight division left for Inoue. And a little Christmas Eve fight, I don't mind that at all. Birchall and Birchall have joined Queensbury, the Birchall brothers. Raider won via TK round 2 versus Kara. Kazi won via TK round 7 versus Magava. Motu won via TK round 4 versus O'Connell. Jarnabek won via TK round 9 versus Mikhailovic to remain IBF World Middleweight Champion. And it was a weird fight that. I mean, first of all, good to see Motu getting the big win and kind of being on a big platform there and actually getting in a big fight. Obviously, she was meant to be fighting on a big Matchroom show recently, but obviously that didn't happen. No fault of her own. So it's still nice to see her actually getting big fights now and being put on a big stage. I think it is about time, realistically. But yeah, the Jarnabek Mikhailovic fight was a weird one. Jarnabek had realistically quite a lot of things not going in his favour. A lot of things in which fighters would complain about, would possibly even pull out of fights because of. But still, nonetheless, he's doing it. He had to make weight twice. He arrived only a couple of days before the fight into Australia. He had a lot of the crowd against him. He had a new coach coming in and literally just coming in for the first time for that fight. And yeah, there was a few things, and then the ref was. I don't really know if the ref had much of a control of what was going on. Mikhailovic was tough. Jarnovic was playing with him early on, got a really nice knockdown and was toying with him, and believed in himself to be able to, just be able to get him out of there. Perhaps he was a bit tougher than Jarnovic fought Mikhailovic in the first place, but he was dominating him, and Mikhailovic was pretty much just leaning on him the whole time, punching the back of the head quite a lot, which is another thing that wasn't going in Jarnovic's favour. And the ref wasn't really doing anything about that, and just grabbing onto him a lot as well. It was a messy fight. Mikhailovic knew that that's what he had to do and that's what he wanted to do, but in the end, like I say, Jarnovic was able to show his levels above and put on another really good performance. And hopefully now we can see him go for unification fights. I'd love a fight versus Erisani Lara. Maybe we'll see that next. Perhaps him on a Riyadh season card. Maybe it's about time that we see that happen. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Moving on, Biswana won by a point versus Leskowski. Cooper won via points versus Barabaz. Fury won via points versus Arrowsmith. Brown won via KO in round 6 versus Bouchetta. Birchall won via TK round 3 versus Butler. Turner won via KO in round 1 versus Corinaldesi. Strand won via KO in round 6 versus Solana. McGibbon won via points versus Ars. Kane won via TK round 2 versus Caceres to become WBC International Silver Bantamweight Champion. Herrera won via TK round 3 versus Flores. Rafferty won by stoppage around 9 versus Turner to become British Commonwealth and WBC International Silver Super Lightweight Champion, and Ball won by a TK round 10 versus Rios to remain WBA World Featherweight Champion. And to speak about that card, pretty much was the biggest card, the biggest event of boxing this week, and it was a good homecoming for Nick Ball, of course, getting a win. To talk about a couple of the undercard fights, a couple of the names in which I'm interested in, I had the pleasure of being in a press conference for this event, so there was a bit of hype, in my opinion, that was created around it. It was nice to see something like a Kane, another very good performance from him, and he's really building himself into perhaps getting into lower world rankings now, and not quite there yet, but perhaps soon. And he does look good. He looks a lot sharper. He looks quick. He looks powerful. He looks like he's got a nice tight defense. I think the whole of the Liverpool stable, in which they have the Everton Red Triangle stable, is doing really well at the moment. A lot of these ones show into this event, and yeah, they're just being put on a good light. And like I say, Kane is one of the highlights of it, as well as of course Nick Ball as well. Herrera, it was an interesting press conference from him, what he was saying, but he put out a dominant, nice stoppage performance, and I'm sure he's a name who's going to be keeping on progressing nicely and probably keep on going through these kind of lower international rankings and perhaps get into a high European level at some point soon. Rafferty was getting beaten up pretty much the whole fight versus Turner. I mean, Turner was just moving and picking his shots really nicely and landing clean, and clearly was outboxing Rafferty, but Rafferty just kept coming forward. Wasn't really the nicest of boxing or anything like that, but at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily always matter, because Turner tired, couldn't get off the ropes, and Rafferty hurt him, and then Rafferty just kept unloading the shots, and then the corner did the right thing, in my opinion, to stop the fight, because Turner just wasn't prepared for a 12-round fight. And that's what you talk about when you see fighters, just not being ready for that 12-round distance. But fair play to Rafferty. A big stage for him to be able to become, of course, British champion, add on to the Commonwealth one as well, and of course the WBC International one he adds on to his collection. So impressive by him. And then Nick Ball, I didn't get a chance to do a prediction for this fight, but I know it would be a very tough test for Rios to be able to deal with Nick Ball. It's a very tough test for anybody to be able to deal with Nick Ball. Perhaps Rios had a little bits of success at times. Ball came on early, had the high pace in which he always has. But Rios, did have little bits of success in pockets, but was pretty much just getting beaten up. Full credit to him to be able to go past the third round when he did get knocked down. He did look out of it. But, that perhaps shows experience from Rios, but Ball was just too much. His style is too aggressive, too in your face, too hard to deal with. Now he moves on after a successful defence, a homecoming fight in which you could tell meant a lot to him and was a huge, success for him. And now he probably will want the rematch versus Vargas. That would probably make sense the most, in my opinion. The Featherweight division is in a really interesting position right now, so I probably would just see that Vargas is probably the best fight to make and perhaps the easiest fight to make compared to the other champions. But it seems like he also wants to stick around the featherweight division for a bit longer. Moving on, Lucas won by unanimous decision versus Lopez to become IBO World Super Flyweight Champion, and I've got my prediction right for this one. I said it would be an interesting fight. I mean, Lopez, I did just say, would be circling around in one direction and trying to go for the single shots, struggling to get in range. Perhaps I didn't really expect Lucas to be quite so in the face of Lopez, but she was imposing herself physically. She did what she had to do in that aspect. It was very messy, the fight. It didn't look too clean, wasn't the nicest. I don't expect it to be quite so messy of a fight. But nonetheless, in the end, Lucas was just too big, too much for that of Lopez. Perhaps Lopez could move down in weight. I don't necessarily know, but she just didn't look like she could deal with the strength of that of Lucas, who is big for the weight. And she progresses on, and like I say, hopefully big fights in the super flyweight division now for her. Moving on now to the MMA news. McGee won via submission in round 1 versus Means. Pennington won by decision versus Esparza. Span won by submission in round 1 versus St. Preux. Almeida won by decision versus Portiera. Hernandez won by decision versus Hubbard. Lucinda won by decision versus Rodriguez. Buckley won by KO in round 3 versus Thompson. Harrison won by decision versus Vieira. Taluzzi won by TKO in round 1 versus Holland. Batista won by decision versus Aldo. Pena won by decision versus Pennington to become UFC Bantamweight Champion. Pereira won by TKO in round 4 versus Roundtree to remain UFC Light Heavyweight Champion. And Esparza has retired. To speak about this UFC 307 card, in my opinion, it was a good card. I mean, it had some controversial moments, it had some interesting moments, some entertaining moments, and just speak about a few of the things. Of course, Esparza has retired, which was realistically quite sad in my opinion. I mean, the whole kind of announcement, the way she went about retiring, a lot of people didn't seem to respect that, which I thought was a bit off. But I mean, it wasn't that long ago since she beat Namajunas. Obviously, it wasn't the most entertaining of performances, but that was only 2 fights ago. And then she fought Zhang, and then she had 2 years out, and then she lost. So, I give her credit for not really wanting to stick around too long when she is getting hurt and things like that. And she's made her money and she's kind of gone now. But yeah, that was a big name to see go. Buckley, that was a big stoppage for him versus Thompson. Thompson, even at the age he's at, you can see the technical kicking ability, the striking ability that he's always had is still very much there. And you can see that he does train hard, but I think it is just the age. And I mean, Buckley looks very good at welterweight. He looks strong, and he's got that kind of duck and weave, get in your face type style, brawling type style. And it was just too high of a tempo, too high of a pace, and then too aggressive for that of Thompson, who didn't retire and does still have skills left, but I just don't necessarily know if he is able to compete around some of the strong top guys in their welterweight division anymore. Harrison, first time she kind of experienced a bit of a test so far in the UFC. She's only, of course, had the one fight before, but then also, before that she hadn't really been fully tested as much as what Vieira did, and that's full credit to Vieira. Perhaps Harrison was overlooking Vieira and things like that, but nonetheless she got the decision win. Probably will now go on to fight the winner, the Pena, and it was a good performance in the end from her when she, like I say, had to show heart. Sad to see Holland lose via stoppage in round 1. Never really want to see that happen. He is a nice name, a good name to have around. And then Aldo as well, that was a close decision, and it was sad to see him lose as well. So some fan favourites losing, which was sad to see. The Pena one was an interesting fight as well. I don't really necessarily know who won that one. Perhaps, in my opinion, I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch, but we probably will see Kayla Harrison fighting Pena now. But it was a really close fight. But I don't know. I thought Pennington may have done enough to win. I'm just not sure. Pena didn't look amazing at times. I think Pennington had a lot of the better striking exchanges. Pena looked like she was going on the back foot a lot more than what she normally does. But I do think that Kayla Harrison probably would be able to beat Pena at this point if she's fighting like that, because Harrison will just be a lot physically too much for her, I believe. And then Pereira, I mean, it wasn't quite as easy, as comfortable as what a lot of people thought. Roundtree showed so much heart, got, to be honest, absolutely battered. His face was mashed up, but like I say, showed a lot of heart. Even hurt Pereira at one point, which is something in which we've never really seen. I don't necessarily know how good of a chin Pereira even has, because he has been hurt a couple of times now, but Pereira managed to come back, carry on the entourage of punches, was just too much for Roundtree in the end. Was winning on points in my opinion anyway. I mean, even Mark Goddard said that he was punching like nobody's ever really heard from anybody before. And yeah, Pereira was just it's just too strong, too powerful. Roundtree, like I say, very tough, very game. Showed that he had to really dig deep and was able to do that. But Pereira was just too physically strong, too powerful, as always, to be able to get the win. And now he moves on again. And, fights like the Ankalaev fight is still available to him. Not really too many other ones in the light heavyweight division scream out as entertaining to many people. Talks about possibly going back down to middleweight. He doesn't seem to want to do that. He seems like he's enjoying the weight in which he's at the moment, which I won't blame him because of the power he is hitting. You probably don't want to be changing the weight, and the fact he is getting hurt a little bit still at this weight. You don't really want to move up to heavyweight where you're going to be facing even harder punches, but then you don't want to move down to middleweight where you have to cut even more and feel weaker. So it's a tricky thing. But like I say, if he feels comfortable, then fair enough, sticking around at the weight. But like I say, there just isn't many fights available left for him. But we'll have to wait and see what happens next with Pereira. But he's breaking records left, right, and centre. He is pretty much the face of the UFC at the moment, and it's his year at the moment. So Poatan, hats off to him. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't need like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.